All right, good morning everybody. To everybody new, welcome to our third keynote today on this stage. And the next speaker is pretty individual. I'm pretty surprised by his professional doing what he did in the past. He's coming from financial industry originally, was working for television for a couple of years and has been the COO of notebooksbilliger.de for the last few years. And his topic is the multi-channel works. Apparently, it's still common that there are differences made between retailers and e-tailers, and he's going to give us some information about this topic. Please give us a warm welcome for Mr. Martin Schwager.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks.
Yep.
So, I walked around a bit in the hall, so I'm pretty sure not everyone knows us, even if we are, let's say, one of the larger retailers in the German-speaking markets. So let me just give you a quick introduction on Notebooks Billiger. So Notebooks Billiger is a classical, I would say, e-tailer started a long time ago. So we are one of the forerunners of the industry in the German-speaking markets. We mainly cater in those markets, so really focused on German-speaking markets for everything that we do. Our main products, of course, is everything around, let's say, consumer electronics, ranging from really tiny, small bits and pieces like mouse pads and stuff like that that you need, up to white goods that need to be shipped with more than one person, so two-man handling. So quite grown a bit and quite complex in the processes. So who am I? I mean, he already did a quick introduction, so I just fill in the gaps. So my name is Martin Schwager. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Notebooks Billiger, which means that I, within the board, am responsible for the things around marketing, HR, and let's say IT operations. And let's say for today, I just wanted to share a bit our way forward in regards to multi-channel, why we did it, what lessons we learned, and hope to get some questions afterwards on, let's say, things that I maybe missed because it wasn't important for me, but it may be important for you. So the good news, I think everyone is aware, and you can see that in the hall, is everyone still says, yeah, we're growing. So e-commerce still is growing. So, I mean, why did we pick that topic? Why do we choose to enter a different market where other ones are quite bigger than we are? And not surprisingly, if you look, let's say, at some of the statements in the press, and I would say some of the statements really are true, I definitely can confirm that e-commerce is growing and we are growing, but of course we're, let's say, one of the big ones. And if you are in the market and are one of the big ones, one of the main questions, of course, that you are always asking yourself is like, okay, where is, let's say, how does the pie look as a whole? And unfortunately, let's say we are growing, but we still look at the other side of the fence and see maybe the grass is greener there. Maybe they get still more revenues there. Maybe sometimes the market is, let's say, swinging back and forth between e-commerce and traditional sales in certain regions. And that definitely is true still for, let's say, a forerunning industry in e-commerce. When you look at our numbers at our core products, still like 74%, that's numbers from last year, is traditional sales. So, of course, there's still customers going to normal retail stores and buying the products there. So, I would say the main question for us in the past always was like, okay, how can we help them to buy more in the internet? Of course, we use a lot of marketing means to do that, but sometimes we don't reach them or we can't convince them to do so. So, how is, let's say, the way going forward in order to tap that potential? And of course, surprisingly, when we looked at the numbers, and I mean, the same is true on the other side, that the grass is always greener on the other side, right? So for the traditional retailers, it's e-commerce is growing, we should be there, we lose a lot of traction, so they enter our market, and so do we. So we decided there is huge untapped potential. We need to be there because it's larger addressable market that we can tap into. For us, it means if we do some things around marketing spend, it's much more efficient if we also can use that and not lose the marketing spends in that arena. Of course, let's say even if we are an internet retailer and we do invest a lot in, let's say, the normal processes behind that when it comes to customer services, still we miss the human touch. So let's say we hand the packages to someone else and he can't really deliver our promises when brought to the front door. So that's definitely one of the pluses we saw. And I would say, last but not least, compared to others that only do classical retailing, of course, for us, it's really kind of like a differentiator against other competitors. And meaning other competitors, I'm speaking of the pure internet retailer world. Unfortunately, while we did that, the traditional retailers, of course, did it the opposite way around for other reasons, which seem to be similar, right? It's like, we can't grow, so market is like flattening out on some of the arenas because still like internet retail is eating up the growth rates in the traditional sales. So they are shifting there. They want to increase their margins because the sales is more efficient than in their normal retail stores. And of course, they also want to get more traction on direct access to customers because when we have a customer, we have the customer in our database, we can like start touching him even when he doesn't buy, and that's even more hard, let's say, in the traditional retail sales. Which means when they had the discussion, I mean, it's really way back when we started that journey going to multi-channel retail. But in the very beginning, and there's like a good story around that, and maybe that's also one of the lessons that we learned. When we do investments, of course, we try to do that, let's say, with a sound approach. And in that case, there's reasons why we did choose that locations. Maybe not everyone knows, but the main center of our warehouse is in Hanover, so it was quite, let's say, easy for us to directly choose the warehouse location and try to start off directly, let's say, a warehouse sales, but just using a traditional approach. So that was like the first steps of going into that market. And the same is true for Munich, which was starting in 2010, where we had like an office location and we had a good chance of directly renting the space beneath that. So we directly could use, let's say, resources that were on the ground in order to do some things and not, let's say, have the additional complexity of another store in another location where no one of our people was on the ground. So quite an exciting journey. But the main lesson, let's say, that we had from the very beginning, and I'm quite happy to share that, is that, of course, what's the key when you do something like that? And let's say in our view, the key is really like the buyer motives. So the buyer motives tend to be quite different from the internet purchase, right? In the very beginning, it's like they want to have more consulting, while as we in the internet, we show as much data as we can in order to, let's say, compare products and, let's say, do a lot of contents around that with our marketing and the suppliers in order to convince them or help them find the right products. The approach in traditional sales is much more consulting. So they, in most cases, didn't look in depth into what they want to have, but they know, let's say, what they want to achieve. So the approach needs to be different. Instant gratification, something that you can hardly achieve in e-commerce, that's definitely one of the motives. So if you want to have something fast, in most cases, the ones tend to end up in traditional retail sales, which directly brings you to immediate drag-along. So as internet retailers, of course, we're used to having huge product lists that we can like have in our databases because it's almost like unlimited space that you can use. That's not anymore true when you are opening a retail store, right? So you have to be clear on what's the most relevant products that you need to have in the shelf space. I would say it's almost comparable to what do you show on your starting page, right? It's the same things that you have to make up your mind on. last but not least, it's, I would say, the main motives that are the most relevant ones is like experience the product. So if you don't have the product that he wants to buy, most likely it's a lost sales in traditional retail. And of course, it's like the risk of return. So the felt risk of return that even if you say, yeah, we have a good refund policy, you can send it back and so on and so forth, it's still like, because we are there, have a physical presence, or as a retail store, the risk of return, that you can't return it, it's maybe the company is not really there, and so on and so forth. Especially true for smaller companies that are not as well known maybe as the big ones, is the most regarded reason for not buying in internet retail but going to the traditional sales. So that was, let's say, the starting point around all our discussions that we are having. And what's the good news? I mean, the good news in the end is like, if you have those motives and you are clear that that's the right one for your business or for your product, and they may be different for other areas of products, we started to, let's say, sketch what does it mean to us. So what do we need to do process-wise or cultural-wise in order to combine that to our existing e-tail operations? And I would say in our case, it meant like, maybe that's a no-brainer, but you all heard of that stories when you go to a DIY, so do-it-yourself store, and you try to find someone and there is nobody there, because they're always like, if you enter the aisle, they run away, it seems, right? There's a lot of sketches around that. And of course, let's say by design, we tried to avoid that. Like in the stores, they're quite open. We don't have like high shelf spaces, and we don't have so much room behind the scenes so that nobody can even, let's say, fall in that pitfall and be away. So don't hide and stay really focused on the products, on the persons that you have there, and and show face to the customer. Instant gratification only works if we have the right products there. So for us, it's really like we try in our core segments, where we know that's the core segments that we want to cater of, to be the one that has the most products available, directly, let's say, for testing and other purposes. Immediate drag along, that's, I would say, the hard part, right? Because in our case, that means we installed almost like a central steering for all the different locations that we have, and exchange a lot of those products. So it's not the store manager that decides this is the product I want to have and I place it here, but it's like completely centralized in regards to the steering. We decide on, let's say, the shelf space, we decide on the location, and we even switch all of those products if it needs to be on a weekly basis. So all of, let's say, the whole store changes on a weekly basis if that needs to be the case from our assortment. And I would say that's maybe something that is relevant because we are doing consumer electronics, because we have like a lot of new products coming in. But I mean, that's really crucial, because if customers come and pass by, they want to see the new stuff. They don't want to see, let's say, 12 months old stuff in our case. They want to see the new stuff. They want to experience the new stuff. And that doesn't really work if we think the one in the store is always the one that knows everything around what's happening in the marketplace. That's, let's say, our product marketing and management guys that know what happens there and what needs to be in the shelf space in order to be successful. Of course, if we do exchange a lot, let's say, in the store, and we have that on a weekly basis, one of the crucial things is how do we replenish that in a manner that it really works? Because you can, let's say, if you exchange a lot, you need to have the resources on the ground to do that, and you need to have the logistics behind that in order to do that. And the funny thing is that I would say the click and collect business directly plays into your hand if you do that, because you need to have the processes around that already, and you can easily do that. It's just like exchanging a product versus putting the product behind the scenes in order to be collected by a customer. And risk of return, besides the fact that, of course, a physical presence and your brand already helps you by making that diminish a bit on the customer size. In our case, we actively decided, let's say, if you compare that to classical retailers, you tend to have, in most cases, the service desk directly at the front. We put it like directly in the back because we said, it's the core offering. We want to have them on the stage, I would say. So we put that always in the back of the stores so that, let's say, we have the experience of the store and of the products before you hit the service desk. The next one is, you could say that's a no-brainer as well, right? Choose your location wisely. But there is one or two things where we said it is more than just retail. So it's not only opening a store, finding the right location, but in our case, it's really like use your existing data that you already have. I mean, you have a lot of data if you do classical retail on micro markets, how they work, what products they buy, where, let's say, you experience or where those customers are located in regards to addresses. And in our case, we, for example, actively decided based on that data to avoid the high streets. So we don't do any high streets. We only do, let's say, highly frequency but good parking lot locations in, I would say, central but B locations. And that's just because we know that from our data, it's really super important that someone can drive in with a car and we don't need, let's say, the tiny bits and pieces that you can collect on the high streets. So that's more or less bringing us to rental costs. So of course, our rental costs tend to be smaller than the ones that you have in the really big locations of our competitors. So that directly brings you a competitive advantage. Parking lots. You need that for click and collect, especially for click and collect, because our data, and we come to that later, showed that we don't even need to have a high penetration of shops. Because when we have click and collect customers, in most cases, it's just because they want to, let's say, double check the product before they really buy it. Right? That's the main reason why they do click and collect. It's either for time because they are they live, let's say, they live outside of Munich, but they work in Munich and they just pass by and take the product with them because then they have it faster. Or they want to experience the product and either then buy it or leave it directly there and refrain from buying. But of course, then you need to have like a lot of parking lots. And I would say the most important that we missed sometimes when we opened locations in the first place is like make your mind up on out-of-home, let's say, marketing capabilities that you get when you rent the location. Because if you don't like negotiate that from the very beginning, it's really hard to get that in. So in our case, we always try to have like a prominent space where we put our brand, and let's say the prominent space needs to be at a point where most passers-by are really passing by. And if we don't get that, we don't take the location. Even if the rest would be perfect, we don't even do it. So that's one of the crucial things we do. For us, it's almost like a marketing vehicle. If we open a store, it already pays off by marketing. And I can show some numbers later. So, but still, I mean, now that we have opened more than the 2 stores, it's still that we are learning a lot on a day-to-day basis. So we are not yet there. So it's let's say it's hard for the traditional retailers to go to the internet still, but they are there. But for us, it's as hard to get to the traditional sales as well. So just to share some of our, let's say, pitfalls. Of course, the processes tend to get much more complex than they have been before. So even click and collect, if you would consider the process costs around that, so really do the math if you do that, because it brings a lot of complexity and it brings a lot of additional costs to your processes. So that's really, really crucial to make up your mind and to know what that costs you and if it pays off in the end. Staff sourcing. So don't underestimate staff sourcing. It's really crucial. In the end, it's like to find the right persons that are the face to the customer, and like work in a way that you want to work them. So in our case, it would be we consider them like you need to be orange. So you need to be bold. You need to know your products, and it's not just reading the things on a paper, but it's really like specialized because we want to be a niche. So we are a niche player in consumer electronics, but we want to be the ones that know their products extremely well. So it's really hard to find the right people that you can grow with. Limited space. Everyone is aware of that. If you see your homepage in a shop, it's almost like the same things that you have to do there. So you need to be strict on what's the right products. And if they're not the right ones and you see that in your data on the second day, take them out. So don't waste your shelf space. And I mean, the internet retailers can be faster at that in compared to traditional retail sales, because we don't tend to have those logins by, let's say, the market structures that traditional retail sales has there. Of course, we made our experiences with, let's say, physical dangers. I would say, like starting from theft and like in Hanover, like storms and the likes. So it's completely different from what you normally have. So you know your warehouse and you do things around the warehouse, but you almost have to have the same efforts in your stores. And let's say in the very beginning we forgot about that. So we lost some money on that. So make up your mind when you open a store. And let's say in our case, it's harder to scale. So it's not as simple as you are in retail. If you decide, yeah, let's add another language, let's go to another country, you still need to make up your mind, but it's really easier when you enter that, like your scale is huge. When you do that, it's almost like a micro scale, but you still have to find the right location, then you have to negotiate, you have to like do things around that when it comes to local policies in different cities. Then you maybe have to rebuild the space, you have to put things in. So it's way harder to scale when you want to be profitable. It's easy to scale if you just take a location, put something in and try to see if it works. But to find the right spot, to negotiate the things, to have it like running and to refine it, that's the hard part that we are still like working on, to be honest. The good things, and I'll add some numbers to that later. The good thing is that, of course, it definitely helped foster relationships. And the funny thing is not only to customers, but also to brands. So we do a lot of joint activities with brands. So it brings you additional, I would say, marketing capabilities that you can bring to negotiations. So make up your mind on that. It definitely had a positive impact on online KPIs, especially the conversion. So we were really surprised what kind of an impact you can get by just having a store there which has a brand name and like a service desk. So most likely, we will experiment with that, but the main question is, do you really need to have a full operational store, or is it just like the service desk behind it, right? So the physical location. Marketing push, I talked upon that already. So it's really like, if you do it right and you have the right location, it brings a local marketing capability to your company that you normally have to pay with really hard bucks in order to have that across the year. So that's, consider that when you see the rent space, in most cases, if you do it right, you will can deduct that from your marketing expenses somehow. And of course, I talked upon that already. For us, it's a differentiation versus a pure play player. But in the meantime, since we are, let's say, one of the bigger ones, I would say it's not anymore a real differentiation for us, but it's in some respect already a must-have. So because the traditional ones are entering our market, so we need to have the same capabilities when it comes to service and sales. So to come to an end, so was it worth it for us? I would say, yeah, definitely. So considering the numbers, so we could have ended up having 100% click and collect, so just have increased our process costs. But in our case, it's only 1/3 is click and collect, and the other ones is almost like buyers that most likely we wouldn't have if we wouldn't have the locations. I just brought the number of like 1/4 of our customers there that are collecting is coming from 50 kilometers and more. So it's really like, in edge cases for some of our locations, I would say it's even 120 kilometers of radius we have that they're collecting their goods. Consider back what I showed in the very beginning. I mean, the main reason for them doing so, if you ask them openly, is really like, I want to have the product in my hand and I want to have it fast. So they tend to want the best price. That's where we are really good at. They want to have it fast, so they just drive and pass by and combine that with other shopping activities, for example. So that was really interesting to see that you can have that kind of additional things. The really interesting part is around conversion. So conversion in the micro location. So if you see your store and you put a fence around that, conversion in that micro location, in our case, is up to 11% higher than it is on average, I would say. So that really shows the impact of such kind of a store location that it can bring to you. And that's not going back to that number, but it's going back to the normal sales. So we don't know why, but it seems to have a positive impact either via the marketing means that you put in place or via the service or via they are really existing, right? It's not like a mail post office box company, but they really do exist. And unfortunately, we are still a private company, or let's say fortunately for us, we're still a private company. I can't really share a hard number, but I can tell you that even, let's say, on the small scale that we build up there, the numbers add up significantly. And they are, even for us in the size that we have, and I would say we are almost like starting to touch the billion, they are of significant and relevant size for us. And that's something where we will definitely expand on. But you can see, as I said before, we are not the ones taking location over location over location and just expand very fast. We want to have our processes in place first so that we are able to scale even that business perfectly, right? And I mean, we are, I would say, almost there, but now we have to find the right location. So it's what we do. Thank you very much. And yeah, the stage is yours, I would say.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Great keynote. Now we do have a couple of minutes left. Is there any questions? I'm coming to you guys, so it's easier for you to raise your hand. Yeah, gentleman in the front.
Hi, Peter from 5CA. The figures you showed right in the beginning, where there's a much higher percentage of physical stores versus online, is that more a German statistic, or would you say that's a European statistic?
No, that statistic that I showed is a German one, and it's, let's say, it's a part of the market. So it's not the whole retail market. The number fluctuates a lot depending on which sector you work in and what product types you have. But it's the ones that we are operating in. A lot of that is still physical.
All right, thanks a lot. Any other questions? Somebody? Nobody here with retails? Yeah, gentleman with the blue shirt. Last question for you.
Hi, can you explain how you measure the impact of the offline store on online sale? The conversion, online conversion?
Yeah, let's say for the numbers that I've shown, it's really like a micro fence approach that we took, right? So you have different KPIs that you can take. It's like the click and collect is the direct impact that you can see. And what we did is, in that case, take your hard figures that you have on the customers and just see how it impacts their micro region, let's say, conversion when you compare that to a similar region. So it's not like an A/B test that you can do, but it's a comparison to other micro regions of a similar structure.
All right. Thank you very much, Martin. Thanks for having the keynote. I think that was a good one. Give it up for Mr. Martin Schwager.